For most of my childhood, my mother was a stay-at-home mom. We had chores, but most of the cooking and the cleaning were taken care of for us. I had 2 little sisters, and they helped a little, but Mom was in charge of the house. Things were different the year that I was 14. My dad was away for the whole year, and my mom took a job as a secretary in a law firm. My sisters and I were in charge of the daily household chores. We were expected to clean up the house and start dinner when we got home from school. You might think that it was hard to have all those new responsibilities, but we loved it. Working with my sisters to figure out how to cook and manage things without any grown-up advice was fun. We loved it that she trusted us so much. We loved the new responsibility, and we really wanted to make her proud. She had cooked for us our whole lives, and to make something for her was exciting. We couldn't wait to have her taste our creations. But as you might expect, dinner didn't always turn out great. I remember one dinner that was a real disaster. We were making mashed potatoes and meatloaf. My sister Pam was in charge of the potatoes. Pam is very easily distracted. She let all the water boil off the potatoes, and then the potatoes burned. The smoke made a gray spot on the ceiling. She scraped off the burned part of the potatoes and she mashed what was left. They looked okay, but they tasted exactly like dirt. I made the meatloaf, and even though I followed the instructions in the cookbook, it wasn't done in the middle. I wanted to just throw out everything, but there was no time to start over. My sisters insisted on setting the table and being ready for supper when Mom got home. I was really worried about that meal we were about to serve her. The gospel lesson we heard today is known as the parable of the talents. It isn't about 3 children, but about 3 servants. It's about a master who goes away and leaves these 3 servants in charge of his money. The word talent in this parable can be confusing. It doesn't mean special ability. It refers to a huge sum of money. I used to imagine the master reaching out and handing the servants some talents. I thought maybe they were some kind of coin. Is that the picture you get in your head when you hear this story? That picture is wrong. A talent was huge and heavy. It weighed somewhere between 75 and 130 pounds. It would have been made out of precious metal, probably gold or maybe silver. It might have had a handle on the top so the master could carry it or drag it. It was a big deal. In Jesus' day, a talent was worth what a laborer earned in maybe 15 years. By giving each of his servants 1 or more talents, the master in this story is entrusting them with a fortune. But the parable of the talents isn't really about money. It's about something even more important than money. The parable of the talents is about trust. The story opens with this demonstration of trust. The master is about to leave town for a long time. He gives a chunk of his fortune to each of 3 servants, 1 talent, or 2, or 5. You can tell the master trusts each of his servants because he hands over that money with no instructions and no limitations. The master eventually returns and calls in the 3 servants. 2 of them have made investments and doubled the money. The 3rd has made nothing at all. He played it safe. He returns to his master exactly what he received. He buried the money in a hole in the ground. It reminds me of people today who hide money in a mattress. He didn't lose a cent, but he didn't make any money either. He explained why he chose to hide the money instead of investing it. He was afraid of the master. He was afraid he would lose the money and be in trouble. He was afraid of his own lack of ability. And he was afraid of what the master's reaction would be. Fear is the opposite of trust. He was afraid to take a risk, so he couldn't make a profit. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if the first 2 servants had lost money? Would the master have been angry? They doubled his money, but what if they had put that money at risk and come back empty-handed? I think the master would have accepted them. Think about it. In that parable, what he commends is not their profits, but their faithfulness. He doesn't commend the servant who produced 5 talents more than the one who produced 2. Each receives the same beautiful commendation. Well done, good and trustworthy servant. Each receives the same invitation. You have been trustworthy in a few things. I'll put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. In his response to the 3rd servant, the master makes it clear that he would have accepted anything, even the little bit of interest he would have gotten from putting it in a savings account. The parable is not about money or ability. Again, it's about trust. The master trusts his servants, and 2 of them return the favor by acting out of trust rather than fear. Things work out well for them. But not the 3rd servant. The 3rd servant does not trust the master, and he certainly does not love him. He calls the master harsh and angry. You know, that's what some people think of God. They can't really commit their whole hearts to God because they don't understand how much God loves them. They see God as angry and harsh, and you can't commit your heart and soul to someone who you do not trust. This servant has made the mistake of thinking he knows the master and he has it all wrong. I have to admit that I have struggled with this parable. I've always hated it that this poor servant who was simply afraid and hid the master's money was punished so severely. He was thrown into the outer darkness where there is weeping and gnashing of teeth. That is harsh and not very loving. If the master is supposed to represent God, this just feels wrong. What we have to remember about this story is that it's a parable. A parable is a story that is told to teach us something. It isn't a historical account. Jesus is telling a story to explain what is expected of his followers. He's making a very serious point. The point is that we are to use the gifts we have been given for the work of God's kingdom. The story has a scary ending because Jesus wants us to get the point. We have been left in charge of great wealth. It's not ours. We are to trust that God will care for us. If we have faith that God is fair and faithful, then we'll reach out and share what we have. In the parable, the fearful servant gets exactly what he is afraid of. He's rejected and cast out. The point is that God does not value playing it safe. Jesus Christ never played it safe. The other 2 servants recognize the generosity of the master. They're honored by what they have received. It's an amazing amount of wealth. They realize the master is taking a risk. They respond by being willing to take risks of their own. This parable can be about our churches. In these days of declining attendance and dwindling offerings, we may be tempted to play it safe. Playing it safe is unacceptable. The church and its resources are not ours. Everything we have has been entrusted to us by the Master so that we can use it to spread the good news about Jesus and to alleviate suffering in the world. We may feel like we have less than we used to, but the truth is we have still been entrusted with great blessings. We have been put in charge of the Master's wealth, and burying it in a hole is not okay. Oftentimes we don't start new ministries or reach out to the community because we are afraid we will fail. We might fail. Actually, we will fail sometimes, and that's all right. The parable of the talents is about risking everything we have for the Lord and trusting that God will love us and care for us even when we fail. Remember that story I was telling you where my sisters and I had just made a dinner of mashed potatoes that tasted like dirt and a meatloaf that was raw in the middle? I was so scared when my mother walked in the door that night. What would she say? She had given us this big responsibility, and we had messed up. How disappointed would she be? Would she say we wouldn't be allowed to cook anymore? We said grace, and then she took her first bite. I held my breath. She swallowed hard and took a big drink of her milk. And then she smiled and said how wonderful it was that we had made dinner and how pretty the table looked. We all burst out laughing, and my youngest sister went to the kitchen and got the peanut butter. My mother was proud that we tried and not angry that we had fallen short. That's what this parable is about. It isn't just about money. It's about loving the Lord and trusting your master enough to take some risks. It's about reaching out in faith to share what you've been given. It's about trusting that you will have enough and you will be loved, even if you fail. It's about looking forward to the day when we will see the Lord face to face. It's about living in such a way that when we see God, we will hear, "Well done, good and trustworthy servant. Enter into the joy of your master."